Okay, cool. So remember kind of like in order to build a Docker image, remember we always start from like a base image and then we end with the command that we want to that will kick off our Docker container, right? So we kind of build an image starting with our base image, then we build on these different layers, and then the final step is that when we call Docker run, we need a command that will actually be run when we boot up our image into a container. So the first thing is just create a Docker file, and we can do code dot, and just remember it's like capital Docker file. There's no extension or anything like that. And then we start with our base image. So it's from, I think, Jupyter yeah, this is fine. SciPy Notebook. All right, and you can just remember you can like go on Docker Hub to see what images you want to use. Lots of times like you'll do some Googling around and see like a similar type of project, and you can build off of that. Then we want to, what do we do when we want to end? Remember, we end with this command, okay? And I'm putting that in brackets, and in the brackets is like what I want to actually call when we boot up the container. So in this case, it's Jupyter Notebook. Also remember that this must be double quotes. If it's not double quotes, if you use single quotes, it will break, and the error message, as I remember, is pretty weak. So just try to remember to use double quotes. Okay, so we have like the base image, right? This is our base image. And then this is our command for when the Docker container starts. And then the meat is like kind of like what you want to like why you're building a new image, right? What do you want to do for your project? So for us, it's like this conda install Kaggle, all right? And actually, this is what we would run in the terminal, but when you want to turn this into something, like when you actually want Docker to run this, you just put the word run in front of this, okay? So now it will, if we have not already downloaded this image, it will download it for us. Then it will run this operation, which will install Kaggle. And this will just like download some files into the image, and then it will stop, okay? And then finally, when we boot up the image, it will run this command. Okay, so let's try to do that. And we'll do, so here's my Docker file. You have to be in the folder with the Docker file when you run these commands. Okay, and notice I got my little Docker image up and running for my Docker software. Okay, so I can just type Docker, and then we can do Docker build. Okay, then if you do Docker build dot, it will work, but it won't name our image, right? So this is, first getting the information, right, from this SciPy notebook. It's downloading that if it isn't already downloaded. Then it's performing this next step of installing Kaggle, right? And it has to like download that package from the internet. And when it's done that, that will be it, right? Because this last step is not going to get run until we do Docker run, until we boot up our container. Okay, cool. So you can see 2 steps, right? If you look at it, this is what we just built, right, 7 seconds ago. We should name this thing. That would be a nice thing to do. So to do that, we'll do Docker build -t for the word tag, and we'll tag this. Let's just call this like Kaggle lecture. All right, dot. Okay. It should only take a second, right? This is because it already has these layers on the computer. And now if I do Docker image ls, I can see this Kaggle lecture is right here, okay? Now I can boot this up by doing Docker run Kaggle, sorry, what did I call this thing? Hold on, Docker Kaggle lecture. Yeah, I should copy it. Docker run Kaggle lecture. And this is going to boot up, remember, on port 8888. If I click on this, it of course won't work, right? Because this is a port running inside my container. So what I need to do is shut this down and do Docker run -p. And remember, it's always the host port is listed first, right? So we'll put this at 9999 on my laptop over to the port where Jupyter is running, which is 8888, and then boot this thing up. And now what we can see, if I click on this, and remember, I just have to change this port to 9999, but I still have the token there, right? So this is booting up. And if I do import Kaggle, right, it's going to say that there is no kaggle.json file. And we want to place it in this /home/jovian/kaggle. So if you just want to kind of see where that thing is, we can do docker ps. We can call this from any folder and just exec into, right, just dig around a little bit, get familiar with our environment, because we're about to move. We want to move a file into there and into this folder. So let's just make sure we can kind of see this thing. So we'll exec into our container and run bash, right? And now we can just type ls, type pwd. We see we have this, we're immediately brought into this /home/jovian folder, and we want to move the kaggle.json file into this .kaggle folder. This is a .kaggle folder. So could not find kaggle.json, make sure it's located here. So kaggle.json, Kaggle is this website for, it just has like a bunch of different data sets. It's for, you can kind of perform machine learning competitions, like try to predict certain things and then win competitions based on how accurate you are. And you can also get like various data sets from there. So what I did is, to log in, you can go and download basically your API keys, all right? But those API keys then need to be located in the correct folder, in the image or in the container, okay? So the issue is that the API keys are here, right? Here they are. But we need to get them inside the actual image, which is not so easy, right? Because this thing's designed to be isolated. So the way to do this actually is not so bad. The way to do this is we can copy, all right? And we have to say copy./kaggle.json. And we can just say into the current directory, okay? So this will copy from my host computer, from my laptop, into the container. And let's just rebuild. Should only take a second. And then we can just do docker run, but instead of actually running this thing, let's run bash. So we'll do docker run -it, and we will override the default command, which is to boot up Jupyter, and instead do bash. All right, and then we'll just dig around. And look, there it is. Look how amazing that is. Okay, so what did we do to accomplish this? All we did was we just said copy./kaggle.json into the current directory. Cool. Or apparently you can also do docker cp. But it's good to code this, right? We want to codify these steps. I would prefer to have this so that we just do docker build, and as long as we have this file here, we'll be good. So one thing to note is how did it know when we did docker build? How did it know, this is a relative path. So it's relative to what? And really what it is it's relative to the dot, right? So the dot is saying the current directory. This is called the build context. So the build context in this case is this my own Docker directory, okay? And in that my own Docker directory, we saw there is this kaggle.json file. So when we do docker build, tag it, the build context, and then it goes here, it's going to say copy kaggle.json from the build context, from this current directory, okay? So that's where I will look for it from. Let me check out the chat. Okay, cool. So the thing that's broken about this, currently we move this file in there. The problem is that it is not moved into the correct folder. In fact, I don't even know that we have that folder. .kaggle does not exist. We have .jupyter folder. We have the file. But if you remember the error message, what it wanted us to do was move this file into a .kaggle folder. So the way we can do that is we can use this thing called a working directory. So working directory does two things, and we'll do working directory .kaggle. So it does two things. The first thing it will do is it will create a new directory called .kaggle. The second thing it will do is effectively so it'll basically do make directory .kaggle, and then it will also do cd into .kaggle. So now when we copy this file into the current directory, it's really the current working directory. Okay? And you'll see, so everything, we're going to stay in that directory. Everything will be performed in that directory, which is actually not a great thing, because it means this command will be run from this .kaggle directory. So probably what we want to do afterwards is actually change the directory back to the /home/Jovian, whatever this thing is, to this /home/Jovian. So in other words, what we're effectively doing is we're going to make a directory called .kaggle, right? Then we're going to cd into that directory called .kaggle. And then what we will do is copy the file from our laptop over to that current directory, right? Over to here. Then the next thing we'll do is cd out. Okay? So I can use that same working directory command to cd out of it. And that should work. And then we can boot up our Jupyter server.
Couldn't you just use the folder location instead of doing the same place in the copy command?
Use the folder location. We could copy into .kaggle, but we still have to make this directory. And I also want to show how to change the context.
Okay.
But yeah, there are certainly other ways to do this. Cool. All right. So let's exit out of here. We can rerun this. Rebuild it. So notice every time I'm changing my Docker file, I'm rebuilding, right? I have to rebuild my image too. So here we start here, create and cd into this .kaggle thing, copy the file into that current directory, and then change back the directory. Docker build. Okay, let's see if that worked. So now with Docker run again, I'll just, we'll just bash into it. If I do ls-a, I can see the Kaggle directory. And then if I look inside of that, right, there's the kaggle.json file. Okay, so these are the main steps that I wanted to show you, the main commands that basically you'll be using. Okay, so the first thing we saw was just, this kind of sandwich thing that we always start with from, and then normally we'll have just a bunch of run commands, okay, in between. The other thing we then saw was the working directory, right? How do we actually, how do we make a new directory and change that directory? So here we did this working directory to create this Kaggle folder. And then because we're effectively in that Kaggle folder, when we copy, right, we're copying into that current folder. And this is copying from the build context on my laptop into that current folder. And then we are changing the working directory back out. Okay. And then finally, this is the command that will be run by default. We still didn't run it because when we ran it, we overrode the default command with this, but we can do that now. And we're going to see some errors. I know that, but we'll get at least pretty close. So let's do -p. We'll do 9999 to 8888. Okay, and then we'll do this 9999. We can now create a new thing here. We can import Kaggle. Here's our error. So it says that this is readable by others on the system. It's really okay, I think. We can fix this we can run this command and even run it through this. We can just put like a run chmod here. It's a little bit harder than that because we'd also have to, it's a little bit of a rabbit hole to actually do this. Because we're going to have to do this as a different user, basically like as the root user, and doing that actually isn't so easy. But anyway, we could start to go down that path if we wanted to. William, you had a question?
Yeah, so here we downloaded a file onto our local computer and then we copied it into the container. Typically, if you're like using a Git repo, for instance, would you download it from the internet and then copy it into the container, or would
Yes.
you run? Okay, so you don't run the download in the like because you could theoretically run git pull or git clone from.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. This could have been like embedded kind of like into the contain. So you'll see a couple different things. Oftentimes what you'll see is it will do like run git clone. I'm trying to think.
Because I was
General,
thinking like then if you had run git clone in the Docker container, then it could change over time, and that kind of is
exactly.
not what you want, right? Okay.
Right. So normally instead what you'll do is you'll have a folder here called like source, right? And you'll git clone this entire thing, right? You'll git clone the source and the Docker file. And then what you'll do is you'll copy, you know, like dot slash source into dot slash source in the container, something like that, right? And then you can, do run Python 3, whatever it is, source slash app.py, whatever you're copying in here. So normally, this is what you'll do. You'll clone down both the code and the Docker file, right? And then you'll do Docker build, right? And that will copy, as you change this code base, you'll have to rebuild each time, which is okay. That's what everyone has to do. And then, boot it up to make sure it works. Okay. And you can see like I like this guy, Miguel Grinberg. He has this Flask app. Let me show you. I think he has so you can start to see, right, how he has the Docker file right here. He's copying over his requirement.txt file. He's installing it. Then he's starting to copy the app over, right? And when you work with this, right, the app is here. So you would develop this, but then you'll build as you make changes. You'll build, you'll do Docker build again, right, which will copy over any changes into there, right? And you can see there he's setting the environmental variable, and then finally, he's running this boot.sh, which probably, right, calls something like Flask run. Okay.
Also, you mentioned the like user stuff. What is the default user if you're running a Docker
Okay,
container?
so it's going to be set by this is something that you would see in the container, right? So I would do Docker PS, and then I can like Docker exec -it into the container. Bash. And then, right, we can do like printenv or something to figure out, to see like the current user here. So here they have this is Jovian, I think is what they're setting, right? But you would like what I would do. One, you could kind of see this through if you went to the user that's being set. Last times this is going to be determined right through your base image, so you can see what they're setting here. And all they're doing, all they have to do is they can change the user like this by doing user root, and then you can change it back. So for instance, for us to run chmod, we could change it to user root, run it, and then change it back. That still doesn't quite work, but it's on the right track, I think. I was trying to get this fixed before class, but didn't quite get there, right? And then we could change it back, something like that. Okay, so you can see this in the Docker file. Otherwise, you can view it just like you'd view, in Bash.
Hey,
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the main thing, like these were the main topics I wanted to show you about Docker, right? Is kind of think of this sandwich, like I always think of, okay, what's the base image? What am I building up towards? The other thing to note is a good way to build an image is to like, a good way to build an image is, let's say we're moving through these steps, we copied, and we're trying to like copy kaggle.json over. A good way to do this is you just like, as you're going, let's say we comment this out. I think we'll still be fine. Right? We can do docker build. Sorry, let's exit out of here. And let's do docker ps and close this thing down. Docker stop. Okay, so this thing stopped. And here's my Docker file, right? So what we can do is docker build -t, like sample Kaggle or whatever. I'll just call this thing a name, and then rebuild it. And then what I like to do last time is I'll just do docker run sample Kaggle bash and -it. And then it's like, okay, where am I? Like, what is the current state of my application? Okay, well, I don't, all I have is, what this SciPy notebook gave me so far. And the next step for me to do is to do conda install Kaggle, right? And then you just be like, does that work, right? So this will take a second, but this ultimately will work. So once I get that working, then I'll copy it over here, right? And then I think of like, what's the next step, right? So you can like do import Kaggle, and then you see that breaks. So then from inside my container, I'll perform the next step, which is to, make a new directory called .kaggle, right? And then copy the file into there. And then again, you can kind of like, all right, so now let's translate that into the appropriate command, right? So working directory .kaggle, okay? And then copy ./kaggle.json into that Kaggle folder, right? At this point, I probably would build it, rebuild it and see where I am again. And then again, I'd like bash, I'd just perform this step again, proceed yes, of, shing into my machine and then like writing out the next step in bash or whatever I need to do, and then finally encoding that in this. Why do I do it that way? Because it's easy to mess things up. If I get an error message here, it's very easy for me to see it, and I can try something else, right? So it's always getting to that feedback loop, all right, when we're coding. Okay, so that's what I recommend doing. So when you go through the labs, in other words, try to do that, right? Try to you saw how you can do it. Just build it and then call bash and then start writing it out, right? And then and just get it working the same way you would if it was on your laptop, and then just translate those steps into your Docker file. Okay, cool.